Hi, Val. Good to see you.
I mean, it's always good to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying yes to this. I'm really excited to have our conversation today. And before we start, would you mind introducing yourself to all the people who are listening in?
Sure, my name is Bao Phi. I was born in Vietnam in 1975, and that was the same year that my parents and my family came as refugees to Minnesota. Um, I grew up in a large, poor, working class, refugee Vietnamese American family in Minneapolis' largest, poorest, and most racially diverse neighborhood. My parents still live there. I've been doing what we now call spoken word poetry, performance poetry since high school. In terms of the arts, I consider myself a spoken word poet. I'm also a published poet. I'm also a children's book writer. I worked for the longest time, nearly 23 years, at a literary arts nonprofit, and now I have a job in philanthropy, um, where my job is to fund different arts and culture nonprofits primarily in the state of Minnesota.
Nice. Thanks, Val. Yeah, and you and I actually met at a virtual gathering called Coming Home to Asian America, where it was for Asian American folks doing philanthropy work and really finding a space where, in so many other spaces, there was a lot of invisibilizing, under-resourced, underfunding that's experienced in Asian American communities, and which ultimately hurts all of us, really. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and it was really beautiful to have a space where we could all be able to like be together in that, to grieve it, um, to even like think creatively about it and just to connect, just to be like, oh, I'm not alone in this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
that's right on. I'm very grateful that for that grounding as I was so new to philanthropy then. And it's not like I didn't know the way that it was. I mean, I've known for a long time that uh philanthropic money to Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities has been like just breathtakingly low. It's actually gotten lower in the last 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So but until you're in the mix, until you're in the machine doing the work, it's hard to really get a sense of what's going on. And so that being able to talk about that with my peers and with community members was tremendously important. So thank you for being a part of that.
Yeah, it was such an honor. And I was floored. I think you were the one who shared the statistic that was it like less than 1% of funding goes to
Yeah.
AANHPI. It's shocking.
0.04, so less than 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so sad. So I'm glad that you're in that work and I'm sure it's like really grueling for you. And I'm glad that you now have a space where, you're connected to other folks doing that work.
Thank you so much. It is very difficult, but as you suggest, what makes it empowering is meeting other people, certainly AANHPI folks, but also other allies who
Mm.
get it, right? And who know that there needs to be a change.
Yeah, right on. And this is the work that I do with FuelEd as one of the trainers is how do we create spaces where people feel a sense of connection and belonging, that they're not alone? I mean, last year the Surgeon General reported that loneliness is an epidemic. Like
Yeah,
it is a real health crisis. And
absolutely.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, the work that, we do at FuelEd is about how do we help folks to feel more safe, because safety is not guaranteed, but more safe,
Mhm,
seen,
mhm.
more secure and soothed, not just for young people, but for our peers and leaders helping us to feel that way. And I'm curious, can you share about a time where you felt, more safe, seen, soothed, and secure in your Asian American experience in schools?
Yeah, well, if we're talking about schools specifically, I kind of want to branch that off of what you and your work is. I think to unpack a little bit about the work that you do, it's really about culture, right? Is that it's about changing the culture. And to tie it back up into the previous conversation, I mean, people have done the work. You can put statistics in front of people. The data's been disaggregated. Um, People know that we're receiving less than one half of 1% of funding. but those are numbers, and some people, their hearts and minds are not going to be changed by numbers. Some will, but I think that what's important is that the culture has to change.
Mm.
And so it's tremendously important for us to work on cultural change where it's not just like, look at how little we're going. That has to hit people in a way that says, that's really disturbing. And we really need to fund Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders because they are a community of need that struggles with systematic oppression, given it's different from other communities, but nonetheless it's there. Um, we need culture to motivate people to actually take action to change things. Otherwise, the numbers are just numbers, you
Mm.
know? And I think to loop it back to your question in terms of education, I mean, I think it's when the conversation includes AA and HPI folks in a way that's really organic and nuanced. Um, Perhaps one way that I can answer this is I'm a father, and when I was growing up, there was pretty much zero, uh, you know, Asian American history or acknowledgement of any
Mm.
kind in the history books, let alone Native Hawaiians or Pacific Islanders, let alone Southeast Asians. Um, and when I became a father much later, 30 years later, you would hope that there would be at least a changed awareness. But what was interesting about my child going to public schools is they, like me for many years, they went to a, you know, low income to working class public school that was very racially diverse, 80% black and brown, 85% free or reduced lunch. So it's not like my kid was growing up. My kid grew up much like me, poor, working class, refugee, um, black and brown, um, immigrant, refugee, all of that type of stuff, right? So I'm not talking about like raising them in the suburbs, although that has its own set of challenges.
Yeah.
I'm just painting you a picture. And even in this environment, there was so little awareness of race as it and race inequity as it pertains to Asian American people specifically.
Mm.
The example I like to give is like there are so many, these good-hearted banners and initiatives and murals that said, Black Lives Matter, no DAPL, uh, uh, no human being is illegal. Like, that I think you get the point. That's like bringing in people in this beautiful way of saying we stand with you. And yet I looked at all of those and the one people missing were Asian people.
Mhm.
And I'm saying like white people would be included before Asian people would be.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm.
Um, and how difficult and painful that is, and reckoning with what effect that has on my child, who has always had a strong identity of anti-racism, but that their Asian identity is taught that it's not a part of that
Right.
conversation. And even though that may sound funny that I'm kind of criticizing murals, bumper stickers, and pins, it's not about that. It's about what does it say about our pedagogy and what
Right.
does it say about our culture, right?
Right.
Because if you look at the classroom, it's no different. They're not learning about any Asian Americans who have made a difference. When you talk about Asian, people will be like, "Oh, let's have an egg roll," or like do a Japanese origami, and that's beautiful too. Don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
Culture is beautiful. Appreciating culture is beautiful, but that's not the same as saying Orientalism and empire is a pillar of white supremacy that
Mhm.
all kids and all people need to hear about as it affects um, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders. Like we need to understand that this is another gear in the machine of white supremacy.
Right.
And I feel like for me, when I feel visible and I feel safe is when people acknowledge that and include a discussion of AANHPI people, and again in a way that's nuanced, because I'm not trying to argue we're the same. I do not believe in hierarchy of oppression. I do believe that, yes, of course, like intersectionality, and that there are differences in how we different racial groups, depending on many different factors, experience systematic injustice. No argument from me. And we need to have those conversations and examinations. I think where it rubs against the way that I believe we should approach solidarity is this idea that we need to decide and come to a consensus about who is the most oppressed. And that is where all of our effort and resources and pedagogy go to. Um,
Mm.
I That makes me deeply uncomfortable, because there are ways in which, and not because I'm afraid of resources getting taken away, it's more that when I think of the different things that we've all been through, our people, all through Asia, through history,
Yeah.
not just with America, but Britain, France, right? All of these different empires,
Mm.
what Latinx people have gone through, what Black people have gone through, different types of indigenous people, including Native Hawaiians and American Indians and Pacific Islanders, all of that pain of history and empire. How do we even begin to categorize and quantify the pain of those different groups?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
in a way that's useful for solidarity.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, how do we
Mm.
even begin to do that? And again, I don't want to like flatten it, because I'm not saying every group should be considered the same. I think every group should be considered, and considered differently, and
Hmm.
considered with nuance. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
It 100% makes sense.
Yeah.
And
So,
what I'm hearing in all of that is just how important it is to bring in all the voices so we see the interconnectedness of it all. Like it
right.
doesn't happen in silos.
It does not.
And right, and in siloing us is how we create more divide, in fact, and like creating this hierarchy versus here's how we've all been duped
Yeah.
and how we can all come together so we can
Yeah.
undo it, we can
Yeah.
heal it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
so yeah.
That's
And
exactly it.
I totally hear you. And it's complex. It's so complex, which is why I think it has to be done with so much care at a much younger age.
Mm,
And it's not happening,
mm.
unfortunately, for the AANHPI community.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Like, we're
Yeah.
completely, like, we're an afterthought at best and adversarial at worst, right?
Mm, hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and you've already touched on this. You are a father, you have a child going through the school system, and you've already shared a little bit about the how it differs and how it actually doesn't differ in so many ways. What would you like to see happening in the classrooms that your child will continue to go through?
Um, I want them to have a much more expansive lens and understanding of history and empire than we did.
What about the educators or the leaders in the field of education who may be unaware of the complexity, the nuance, and the history that needs to be brought in, or who are who don't know how to bring that in? How
So,
can they create a culture
yeah,
of feeling, safer, soothed, seen, and secure without necessarily
yeah.
having all of that information?
That's a great question. And I would add, like, sometimes they're deliberately blocked from bringing in this information,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, for me, it's a question of curriculum, right? Um, and I don't need to tell you that. I'll just put it this way, democratically. We need to really, and I'm not saying you, I'm talking about we, in terms of as a country and as a culture in America, need to really ask who is in charge, who has the power to shape and enforce what is taught to kids,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Um,
And even
because
how power works in a space.
yes,
Like
yeah,
the teacher who's going to teach, I taught second grade, or I'm thinking of the teacher who's like, but I teach biology. I don't know how to bring this curriculum in.
Right.
It's like it's more about, like you said from the very beginning,
Mhm.
it's really about what culture are we creating in a space.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And and you're right, like my argument in this work that I do with educators and in the leaders in the field of education is like the leaders have to know how to create a safer space, a space that is soothing and people feel seen and secure. And
Absolutely.
what
And
does that look like? If our leaders can do that, that's going
yeah.
to trickle down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like my heart goes out to teachers, public school teachers especially. Like they're underpaid, under-resourced, they're underappreciated. Uh, and it seems like more and more and more so, right?
Yeah.
And so and I hear what you're saying, and I really don't have the answers. Like
Mm.
I think we really need to both provide resources for public school teachers and all types of teachers, but especially public school teachers, all teachers, but especially public school teachers. We need to support them, show up for them in terms of like who we vote for, and and go on strike with them or like understand basically support them and help guide them and give them materials. Like, for my part, I know this is really small, but like as a children's book author, like I'll go into some public schools either at a steep discount or appear for
Mm.
free, on my own dime. Um, because I know that for a lot of them, they have no money or resources to bring in an AANHPI speaker,
Yeah.
right? Um, that being said, I want to be careful here that because I have a full-time job as an artist, I can figure that out financially. Not all artists can do that. Not all writers can do that. So I don't want to put the shoe on a different foot in terms of obligation. I'm just talking about one way that I have figured out
Yeah.
to contribute given to my circumstances. Um, so I don't know if that answers your question enough.
Yeah.
But if I could go on one more tangent, like the idea of like, well, what does something like math or science have to do with this type of stuff? But if I can go back to our original discussion, like I think there's a way in which you could argue if you teach something like math, you can teach something like the statistics of like if there's $100 being given away
Mm.
and one person gets half of 1 cent,
Mm.
which is like less than half of 1 cent out of that $100, how does that make you feel, right?
Mhm.
Or like what is the math? What is the mathematics of that, right? Um, and then in that way, you can start a conversation about this is actually why math is important, so that you can figure out where
Mm.
resources need to go. You can figure out where um, systems are broken or not serving the right people. And this is not a new idea. I know that there are radical left mathematicians who do a lot of this work, who teach math through a lens of like, um, I'm paraphrasing here, but like teaching youth like statistics work through the lens of like police brutality,
Mm.
how many black men are pulled over and harassed versus, white, and like teaching stats through that way. Again, I'm paraphrasing. That's not my idea. That is something that was told to me. But just
Sure.
as an example, right, of uh that there are actually different ways to like really more effectively teach different subjects if you bring in these things that a lot of kids are actually struggling with, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
It
Yeah.
does. It makes a lot of sense. And I think for me, even before the academics come into play, students can't learn unless they're feeling
Invested
really
something.
seen,
Right.
yeah, and safe in the classroom. And
Definitely.
so for an educator in a classroom or for even an administrator who are working supervising educators, like an educator, as an
Yeah.
educator, there are times I didn't feel safe because
Right.
of administration. So it's like,
Right.
unless my nervous system is regulated and feeling
Yeah.
present,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be able to do this
Right.
amazing work.
Right. Right.
So just
Right.
again, coming back to like, how do we create these cultures? And
Mhm.
I think it's a hard question. I think
Mhm.
because we're pushing back against the culture that willfully doesn't want it to feel that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe to like give us a little bit of hope and kind of a pragmatic idea. If I can give an example, I really don't mean to be self-serving. I'm really just trying to talk about real world things that I have heard.
Yeah.
So an example, someone reached out to me out of the blue, and they were a white teacher, and they had a lot of Southeast Asian kids, and they found it very difficult to get to engage their students in any type of conversation, to open up, right? Until they showed these kids one of my picture books,
Mhm.
which is about a Southeast Asian family,
Yes.
and they said that it was like a switch had gone off, and these Southeast Asian kids were like, "Oh yeah, and that reminds me of this, and my family did this, or my family didn't quite do this, but it was like this." You know what I mean? And so,
Yes.
and that's like a very simple book that you could get at a library,
Right.
or you know, books thankfully are not outrageously expensive. Um, or you could borrow it, right? Or and so that's an example of like one simple thing that you can do is if you have
Right.
students that don't feel seen, you can ask a simple question. You can ask them, what is it going to take for them to feel seen?
Mm,
Some cases is a book. Maybe it's like a, a 3 minute YouTube video or
that's right.
TikTok. You know, maybe it's a comic strip or a graphic
Mm,
novel. Maybe it's a television show. Maybe it's a song, right?
exactly.
Um, So I think that there are different ways in which different strategies, and one of the things is just ask kids.
I love that. I love just like they're right there. We can ask the students what do they need and want. They know if they're given a platform, if they're seen as autonomous beings who can also add to the curriculum and the culture in the classrooms. And that's part of, I think it's a huge part of making a place feel safer where people can feel seen as like, oh, my voice matters here. My teacher or my administrator sees me as a human being with my own particular needs. Um,
That's
and
absolutely.
and you know, I want to share about your book actually. It's called A Different Pond. It has won many awards and rightfully so. I have a copy of your book, Bao, and I love it so much. And just seeing, you know, I'm not Vietnamese. I'm Korean, and seeing Asian siblings in a text, it the impact it had on me as an adult. I can't imagine what it could do for young people. And so just hearing you speak about the story of this teacher who brought this book in and how it just opened them up is very powerful.
Absolutely. And there's also a way in which, you know, the thing about art, right, is sometimes you don't know you need it until you need it.
Mm,
And I'm not just talking about my book, although you're very kind to bring it up. I'm just thinking about all the times when I was a kid, if I opened a comic book or I saw a television show, I saw an Asian face flicker by just for a second, or there was like an Asian character. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that sparked something in. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like a recognition, a
Yes.
hunger, a reflection. And sometimes even when I didn't have the vocabulary or the understanding to know what that meant,
Mm.
that it was important, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's so visceral that we may not be able to put words into it, and it has this impact on a deeper, like primordial level. Um, yeah, and definitely how to bring it. I think what you're hitting on is like just that strand of how do we invite our young people into the conversation in making the cultural shifts is I think we need to really focus on that. And that takes an educator or leaders of education to have the tools to create that opening. And a lot of us, unfortunately, don't have it because we didn't grow up with it. And that's what FuelEd does. We go in and we do workshops on how to be secure attachment figures. How do we first examine that for ourselves? Where have we not felt safe, soothed, seen, and secure? How
That's
can
right.
we create that? How can we integrate that into our own awareness and then bring it forward into the spaces we're in?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Uh, yeah. Well, Bao, we're coming to a close, I'm wondering if you have any like final words for the audience who's watching, particularly the people who are in positions of power to cultivate culture in spaces that are more inviting. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. And I think my view is we can learn from everyone. And I don't mean to flatten difference here, because certainly when we look at history, we have been forced to learn about some people more than others, right? That's what this whole conversation is. That being said, we can learn from everyone. And what I want for my child is what I want for the world, which is I want my child to learn about everyone. I want my child to see everyone. And that certainly includes white people. Yes, includes white people, yes. And it includes Black people, includes Native American people. It includes Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander people, Asian people, Latinx people, Swana people, right? Queer people, women, people with disabilities, Jewish people, different of all types of religions, all different classes, walks of life, speaking all different languages with different opinions and intersections of all of those things. Like, for me, that is not threatening. For
Mhm.
me, that is the way that our minds, our hearts, and our children should be. That's the way that our minds and our hearts should be open. That is the way our children should be taught to experience the world.
Mm.
And I feel like if you are in a position to make a change where more of that is able, where more of that can happen, that would be the plea, right? Is that if you are in a position to make a difference, make the difference.
Mm. Well, thank you, Bao. Yeah. Representation and dignified representation really matters. Um, it's an
Absolutely.
easy way to start. Yeah.